The stories contained in this podcast are the recollections of the guests we've invited onto the show. We are an outlet for people to share their truths, and we accept no legal responsibilities for the stories contained herein.
I'm Kendra Sheets.
And I'm Rich Gill.
And this is Enough, a podcast that aims to shine light into the darkened corners of the music industry while discussing the ways we can and should improve ourselves and, in turn, our community.
This podcast may contain graphic descriptions of sexual abuse and assault, including rape. These accounts can be triggering, especially for those who have also experienced sexual trauma.
If at any point during this podcast you feel yourself getting triggered, we suggest taking a break and taking care of yourself before continuing. But we do ask that you continue if you are able. These conversations can be mentally and emotionally taxing, but they are so important to have.
This is the second half of our interview with Michelle Rhodes.
I showed up at their rehearsal space to talk to him, and it went very wrong. It went from, we need to talk because you're pregnant with my baby, to him screaming at me that I had killed the baby, to him sobbing in my arms that he should have been there for me. I was on my knees, like basically soothing him, and he told me to wait there for him. It was very emotional, and I thought, okay, oh my God, he like really wanted to have this baby with me. It was just so bizarre. That was what I was left with in my completely warped little 15-year-old brain, was he loves me. He really loves me, and he really wanted to have a baby with me.
As you're telling this, I keep having to remind myself, you're 15 years old as all of this is happening. And it's just so much for a woman of any age, let alone a literal child, to have to deal with basically on your own.
I mean, you're 15, you're underage. You are soothing an adult male for what has happened to you.
Yeah.
To make him feel better. It's such a powerful visual, too, of you on your knees, kind of cradling him in your arms as he's having an emotional breakdown.
It went so strongly from him screaming at me that I had murdered this baby to being like, oh my God, why didn't you tell me? Like, I would have been there for you. It was such a flip of the switch, you know? And I was like, wow, okay, I'm going to stay and we're going to like be together and it's going to be amazing. And I went next door to the studio next door, which was much bigger, and was hanging out with my friends over there. I remember having to go to the bathroom, and they had an outhouse in Hollywood, an outhouse. And this outhouse was so disgusting. I don't even know why. Like, I should have just peed behind a building.
Like the rest of Hollywood does.
Right. Like, I mean, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go in there. And I walk out, and there he is. He's come back, and he is having sex with some woman over a car in the parking lot. And there's tons of people by now. By now, the sun is going down. It's, you know what I mean? And it's like, there's starting to be a gathering. I remember I walked right up to him, like beelined it straight for him. And I just was blown away. I was like, this is what you had me wait for? Really? Like, really? And I could like touch her. You know what I mean? I was just right there. And he's still fucking her while he's talking to me. And he's like, he starts telling me these really sick things. And he has never spoken to me like this ever. This man is, at that point, I would wake up in the night and he would be like staring at me and being like, you're so beautiful. He treated me like I was fragile and like I was important to him. It was really weird. And so I'd never expected this. I'd never been yelled at, and he had screamed at me earlier on, and then the sobbing, and then I come out and he's a totally different person. I mean, a different person. And he asked me for the keys to my apartment, and he said that he was going to take this girl there and go have sex with her in all of the same places that he had sex with me.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And I just remember being like, you're fucked. Like, fuck you. And I went to go get my stuff. I was like, this is bullshit. So I go into back to the bigger studio, and I go grab my purse, and I'm heading out, and I've got to go pee. And I look into the outhouse, and this woman that he had been having sex with is puking, and he's standing with her. And I'm like, oh, okay, they're on drugs. Like, immediately my head was like, oh, okay. It's just like too early in the day to be like that wasted drunk, if that makes sense. It was, I mean, people day drunk all the time, but to see someone actually vomiting at that particular time immediately made my brain think, oh, he went and did drugs. Like, she's on heroin. And I walked up and I was like, okay, waiting. And she walked out of the outhouse, and I remember him calling me in, and I was like, no, I'm not going to come in there, blah, blah, blah. Like, what the fuck are you thinking? And he was just like, come on, baby. Like, come on.
Into the outhouse.
Yeah. And I'm like, no, fuck that. And mind you, I'm madly in love with this asshole. And he like practically like brings me in to the outhouse, you know? And he's holding me, and I'm struggling and being like, and he's like, baby, blah, 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 da, da, da. And I'm like, this is fucking bullshit, you know, and he's holding me. And I was wearing like a tube dress, like a bodycon dress, a black, like skin tight, just stretchy dress, and these little boots. I remember them being brand new boots, and I loved them, and I never got them back. But anyway, I was wearing this dress, and he's holding me, and I'm struggling, but not like fighting. I'm not like, motherfucker, you know? And he picks me up in one fell swoop and fucking rips my dress off me. My boots fall off. My dress is off me, and I am naked. I'm wearing nothing. As soon as my clothes hit the floor, it was so bizarre. I don't understand to this day how it happened. As soon as my clothes hit the floor, his roadie came in and grabbed my clothes. And that's when I freaked out. And I don't know if JoJo was just trying to be, I don't know if he was just trying to be bratty. I don't know how he knew my clothes were off. I have no idea about any of that. I don't know if the door was open when my clothes got ripped off. And I just remember him coming in and grabbing my clothes, and out he went like a little thief. And I snapped. I remember being like, you're going to go get my clothes. Get my fucking clothes now. And in this day, I was more rude to him than I could possibly had ever been before. And I started yelling at him, and I was like, get my fucking clothes. And instead of him getting my clothes, I could see something switch in his eyes, and he picked me up. Like, he had me like this, ripped my dress up, and then picked me up like this. Like he was going to, you know, take me over a threshold. And he walked me through the parking lot, and I was totally naked and screaming my head off. This story comes out in so many books as like, she went running down Sunset Boulevard screaming. No, I was screaming in this parking lot for someone to fucking help me. And no one helped me. He threw me in the studio, and almost immediately he was holding me down. And the way that he was holding me down was terrifying. He was holding me down with his hands on my knees, and his knees were on this part of my elbows, like the inner part of the elbow, you know? And I remember it hurting so bad, and his ass was in my face, and he was holding me down. He was calling people over to me like a carnival barker. Like, she's got the best tits in town, and had people coming over and touching me. And they were not nice about it either. It was really brutal. And I was surrounded by people, and I was screaming. And he kept screaming that he was going to shit in my face if I wouldn't shut up. And I remember thinking, he's going to do that. Like, I kept thinking, he's lost it. Like, I don't know who he is. And I remember screaming, it's me you're doing this to. It's me. This is me. This is me you're doing this to. It's me. And they had put bondage ankle cuffs on my ankles. And so my ankles were completely cuffed together, and yet they were ripping, like trying to rip my legs apart. And I thought for sure, like there was a piece of me that was not quite in my body that kept telling me to just keep saying it was me. It's me. And maybe that would get through to him. Like he would snap out of it and realize that he was brutally hurting me and allowing these other people to like put themselves inside me and pinch me and all these things. It was really horrifying. And then he spun around and he put himself in me and entered me and put his face in my face. And I remember trying to bite him. And I've heard other people say that I thought he was going to kill me. And that's how it felt. I thought he was going, I really believed that he was going to defecate on me and hurt me. And then when he turned around like that and I tried to bite him, I was fully prepared for him to bash my face open. Like I was fully prepared. And he didn't. It was almost as if he came to himself for a second. He threw everyone off of me. The ankle cuffs off of me. And he was holding me again like he was about to take me over a threshold. And he was. He did both times take me over a threshold. This time, I remember begging him for my clothes. And I told him, please just give me my clothes. I'll never come here again. Ever. And he told me that I didn't deserve my clothes. And then he threw me out of the door naked. And I landed in front of the guy that was in the band next door. He looked like he was right about to come in and get me. He looked like he was going to come in and do something because he was right at the door. And he went next door and he got me a beach towel and he wrapped it around me and he was so kind to me. And he brought me into that studio and not long after that, my mom's boyfriend, Vince, appeared. And they had a lot of respect for Vince. Vince was, he's a very well-to-do musician at that time. And he ran the Shamrock Studios and he was really into ninjutsu. And he was a really tall man. He was like 6'4.5" and not someone to mess with. And so Vince showed up to save me and take me home. And I remember he demanded my clothes. And I got my dress back and my purse and never my boots. And I walked back to Vince's house.
The following clip was taken from an interview conducted by Serena Markstrom in 2019.
Do you know that Michelle and had a relationship?
I would say, I would say that they had a relationship beyond what is portrayed in the book. I know he used to come to their house, their apartment, and do his laundry. So, in my opinion, there was more of a relationship than was portrayed in the book. To what extent, I couldn't say with any authority.
But before the assault, you knew and Michelle to have some sort of relationship?
Yes.
So what do you remember about the night of the assault?
Somebody from Johnny and the Jaguars studio called me and said, basically, something has happened with Michelle. You need to get over here. So because it was so close, I walked there, went down the alley. Michelle was at that time in the Johnny and the Jaguars studio, and she had a blanket around her. So I got her, and I don't even remember. I think she just kept the blanket wrapped around her. We picked up her clothes and walked back. It was only 2 blocks to the apartment, to where I was at the apartment. But all of the stuff in the book about her running down the street naked never happened. All of the stuff about the police being called that night never happened. Now, Michelle has said that she spoke to somebody who believes they may be confusing details of another incident with this particular incident. But I was there immediately afterwards. I went and got her, walked back, next morning took her to her mom's house. All of the details about the crazy groupie running down the street never happened.
And I swore him to secrecy. I told him, please, please don't tell mom. Like, I really thought my mom would kill this guy and go to prison. My little Puerto Rican mother. And so he, he was like, I have to tell your mom. And he said, just give me a little time to process this and tell her in my way. And I didn't. I was just totally in shock. And I remember I came home one time and she was hyperventilating and he was there. And I was like, okay, it's on. Like, I'd never seen her that upset before. I told her everything except for being pregnant. I didn't tell her that. I think that would have sent her far over the edge. She called the police right away, and I was shocked that the police showed up as fast as they did because it was Hollywood, but they did. And when they found out everything, I think they took it a little seriously because a lot of the serial killers in that area had left people raped and bound and naked. So once they heard about the binding and being thrown out naked, and they went after him, and that's when the phone calls started. As soon as they broke down the door, and the drummer called me first, and he was with the guitar player, really good friends, and they both called me just like, what happened? And I told them what happened. I told them what he did to me, and they both started crying. They were both sobbing. And they called a lot. And I know that they were horrified about what happened to me, but I also know that once it sank in, they were horrified about what this could do to their careers too. And so, they were already begging me to like not go to court. And the bass player came to my mom's house with his girlfriend at the time. The bass player was what I called the grown-up of the band. He always had a job. He always had his own place. And he always had a monogamous girlfriend. So he showed up with his girlfriend to beg my mother to drop the charges. And I'll never forget him saying, we know that something's wrong with him. And we promise that he will get mental health and that he's not going to hurt any more girls. And my mom was not having it. And the closer and closer we got to the court date, I was getting bullied on the streets. Their close-knit family had grown some. And so they had fans now. And then they also had people that really thought that they were part of this internal family, too. And I got really fucked with. The closer and closer I got to the court date, I was having a lot of suicidal ideation. I almost killed myself a couple times, and I just couldn't do it. I couldn't go through with it. And I remember being in the detective's office and just losing it and being like, I can't do this, and running out of that office and not going to court. My birthday is in February. I turned 16, and he just a month later, like I think even just a couple weeks after my birthday, they had that show that all of the A&R people were at, and his manager at the time, who was not their manager until this happened, she shielded him from the cops. They stayed at her house, and she like tells everybody about it. Like, yeah, shielded him from the police for raping a girl. And then never mentions that I was a little girl. In fact, the last book that came out about this and mentions this particular manager and says straight up that she's all about women's lib and all about women's rights or something. But why would a girl go to that studio unless she wanted that? It's all right there.
But you also, when you were so young, not only had to make a choice like that, you trusted people that were in his band, that you were friends with, that they were going to do the things that they promised you, your mom, and Vince, all that they were going to do to make sure that everyone else stayed safe, despite the fact that all this was going on. And if, as they got bigger, he should have gotten some sort of help.
Yes. I mean, really and truly. And them going into this knowing that he had these issues and these problems, I really could not go through with it, primarily because I knew that if I did, my friends would lose their chance. And I believed in them so much, and I didn't want to take that away from them. And I didn't feel like I could live with myself at that time if I did that. And I think, gosh, you know, I ran into a few of them after the fact of them being famous. And not once were they like, what can we do for you? There was none of that. It was nothing like, it was emotions and them crying and being like, I love you. I miss you. I don't know. It was very weird. And it's still odd to me to think about how famous they got and how much of these like gigantic rock stars they are, because they're just these guys to me. People say, wow, you're really brave to do this. And I'm like, these are these dirt bags that I knew, these guys that I love.
The following clip was taken from an interview conducted by Serena Markstrom in 2019.
She made a very hard and adult decision with her mom, and I was there. There were literal meetings to discuss what to do, and I was there for it. Several of the guys from the band came by on several occasions, said, please don't press charges. There was a conscious decision made to not press charges based on the idea of not punishing the other members of the band and or literally depriving the world of what was going to be a big band. Mm-hmm. And I think she deserves credit for that, rather than being portrayed as, you know, this crazy groupie that, you know, almost caused the disaster. It's just not true.
So how do you think she should be seen as part of the history of the band?
Michelle loves music. Michelle is a musician. She's a great singer in her own right. And she's always loved music. She was never a crazed groupie. And at the time, I believe she made an adult decision and a difficult decision based on love of music and of the music industry to put her personal feelings aside in order to not ruin what was going to be a good band. Mm-hmm. And I think she deserves more credit than the way she's being portrayed.
The following clip was taken from an interview conducted by Serena Markstrom in 2019.
She was saying at the time, and she continued to say, about how, you know, they were begging and pleading with her. They were showing up at her house like every day, pleading her to not press charges because, you know, this was their first album. All they had was basically demos at this point, and the album was about to be released, and that this was putting everything on hold. Mm-hmm. And if she were to press charges, I mean, they wouldn't have an album. And I mean, this is what they were saying. It was really, really dramatic. And so, you know, they were just basically a Hollywood band at this point, but, you know, everyone knew like they were gonna break, mm-hmm. you know. And so she said this story, and it's like, oh, I was just like, oh my God, I'm like, you got to go to the police, you got to, maybe she had already, because it was at the point of the choice of whether or not to press charges. Mm-hmm. So maybe she had already gone and reported something at that point. I don't remember, but I urged her to do it regardless. And she really, you know, she loved the band, and she loved it, and, you know, their music, and she believed in them, and they were, I mean, she was not the kind of girl who would be getting all wasted and running down the road naked. It's just, mm-hmm. She was not that girl.
Yeah.
She was not an out-of-control, crazy groupie.
But yet, you know, I did go up and see the bass player play this song. He had a Me Too movement song. That was one of those like straw to break the camel's back thing. When he came out saying that he was a advocate for To Write Love on Her Arms, which is a nonprofit to help girls and feminine and trans women that are cutting themselves, that are hurting themselves, that are self-harming and have suicidal ideation due to trauma. And there he is being like, I'm a good guy. And then he writes this song about me, about this situation, and says that it's about a 15-year-old girl, but not me. And it's about a 15-year-old girl that got murdered and whatever. I actually went up to go see him play because I thought, there's no way. Like, this song has to be about me. It's got to be something from his heart. Like, he's been hurting over this and it's coming out in his music. And then I watched some interviews where he just kind of threw us all under the bus and was saying some really weird stuff. And I thought, I don't know. But I wanted to go see him. And I thought for sure, like, me being in front of any one of these guys, there's no way that they could ignore me. There's just no way. And along the years, people are like, maybe they did too many drugs to remember you. I'm sorry. If you know any band at all, I don't care how many drugs they've ever done in their life, they always remember the beginnings of their band. They always remember who was around at their first shows. They always remember this tight-knit group of how they came to be. And that's why I think they don't let that piece out of their books, but they've just taken my story and like just made me out to be a pretty fucked up person, you know, to where I have fans actually like arguing with me
about your life, that you
Absolutely.
were there, and they're
And
like,
your experiences. People who aren't even born yet are wanting to argue about things. Like,
right.
Yeah, the fans, the hardcore troll fans are always like, her story just doesn't match up. Her timelines don't match up. And I'm like, how? How do the timelines don't match up when I was actually there living this? Yeah, they argue about things that they've read about because they're reading all these books,
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
that are getting my story very purposefully wrong.
there are, and probably will be, a number of naysayers that say, you know, it was just the 80s. Things were so crazy. People did things. It was the Wild West. You lived in Hollywood. What did you expect? You know, you wouldn't go there unless you wanted a XYZ kind of crowd.
Right.
But no matter the decade, no matter the year, on your story, more than others, where maybe it was a rape in the 80s. Maybe it was a pedophilia situation in the 80s. This is a public rape of a 15-year-old child that took place in a parking lot where numerous people groped and violated you. And now everyone seems to forget that existed.
It just, I mean, I'm still floored that all of a sudden it was like lots of people all over me. And yeah, no one dared to help, except I know that other singer, I know that a couple of the guys from the other band reached out, and that's why Vince showed up. But yeah, nobody in that parking lot when he was dragging me, you know, holding me naked through there screaming, nobody bothered to stop him at all.
The following clip was taken from an interview conducted by Serena Markstrom in 2019.
So when you were angry, you knew it had taken place there.
Mm-hmm.
And what all were you angry about? Like,
I was angriest that he would do something like that to her, and I was really that he would hurt her and harm her, and I was really angry that he would have the nerve to throw her out like she was a piece of garbage. What kind of human being does that to another human being? Has so much disregard and disrespect for a person that they know and they profess that they care about, and the person they know, to throw them out, to hurt them and throw them out as if they were trash. Still, I don't understand it. It gives me like goosebumps, and I really at this point in my life wish we would have really gone a different route. I would like to see them. I don't care about the band anymore. I don't care that they could have ended up broke. They should have. They should have.
right.
How many other people have they harmed that we don't know about?
I'm so grateful that Serena gave up these interviews too. And especially, I mean, my mom, when she did that interview, she was in such an interesting space of, she hadn't been doing good before that. And when she did these interviews, she was very newly sober. She had never had problems with drugs and alcohol really until later on in life. And I was literally driving her back to get on a plane to go back to sober living in California. And she agreed to do this. And so we literally stopped. It was like we stopped over at Serena's and did that interview.
Wow.
And my relationship with her was almost motherly by this time. And now that she's passed, it's going to be really intense to hear her talk about it. And I'm grateful that Vince all these years has stood up for me and told the truth.
We had talked to you and done the pre-interview before we ever got our ears on these recordings. And so as you're listening to them, it's like, yep, that's what happened. Yep, that's what she said. I mean, it's to a T.
The following clip was taken from an interview conducted by Serena Markstrom in 2019.
When she told the story about the boots, that was when I was like, I 100% believe her. Like, that is exactly what a 15-year-old girl would do. Like,
Totally. I mean, I drove her there.
yeah.
Or, either myself or I feel like I was in the car, but I feel like I drove there. I remember it. I remember waiting in the parking lot. And then learning more and more about the story at that time. And so I had known first, and I was going to give her a ride because she wanted to go get her boots. And then on the car ride over, I was being told what was going on, and I was like, oh my God, should she be going in there? And then she came out with no boots, and then she's told more of her story that, I had no reason not to believe her,
All the years later, when I actually got in touch with her and told her that I was going to be talking about this, it was the first time actually that I told her how sorry I was that I had left that in her hands and that we were just kids. She was just a kid too. And she told me, I remember her saying that it was just very important for people to know about the pregnancy and about what had happened. And that as far as this story goes, it was a very important piece of it. And so I was very grateful to her that she did the interview with Serena.
The amount of shock comes through in her voice when she's recounting, like how she was kind of processing, like in real time, what was going on with you and what was going on there in front of her, just as it was happening. I don't know. It rang so true. And it was really off-putting to hear kind of how she still, at the time of the interview, felt so like jarred by all of it. And like the memory of like how upsetting all of it was to kind of experience and put it together and then come to the realization of like, this is going on here. We'll fill the rest in later, but we're going to take care of this issue right now.
It was just such a surreal night. And even as friends, we didn't talk a lot about that again. In fact, when you mentioned the boots, we laughed about this because she was like, I remember going back to that studio with you. And I was like, I went back there? And she was like, yeah, to get your fucking boot.
She mentioned that too. She mentioned the boots a few times. She's like, these were very important to her.
She was like, we had to go back for those boots. We all just dealt with so much stuff that I don't even think her and I ever really talked about it again on those levels.
Again, we're talking about children. Like how, would you even know how to like talk about and process something like that at that age?
Once I had realized that I was not going to go through with going to court, there was nothing my mom could really do about it at that time. If I did go to court, then there would be no case. And so I didn't. I was like, I'm not going to do it. I went out to the Troubadour And the whole band was there that night. I'll never forget this too, because the singer, he looked like he was a professor. Like, I don't know if this was his suit for court or what, but he was wearing this like coat with patches on the sleeves. And I remember showing up and he came right up to me and he was like, "We need to talk." And I was like, "Yeah." And he didn't have any idea that I had already made this decision not to go forward. So he immediately was like, "Oh my God, I cannot believe I hurt you." I mean, profusely apologized, horrified at what he had done. "I'm so sorry. I'm an asshole. It's all me, blah, blah, blah. You're too good for me," all this stuff. And I took that all in and I said, "You didn't have to do what you did to me. You could have just told me you were an asshole and that I was too good for you or whatever bullshit you're telling me right now. You could have told me all that. You stained me." And I remember telling him that I wasn't going to go through with going to court and that I couldn't do that to the rest of the band. I couldn't hurt them and destroy their lives because of what he did to me. And I remember he said something along the lines of, "I've never been loved so purely by anyone like you." I looked at him and I said, "You're never going to know from this moment on whether someone really loves you for who you are ever again. Ever. And I did love you for who you are, and I do love you for who you are, and you hurt me in ways that I will never be the same. I can't wash this off, And since that, I realized like my body was the scene of a crime. I have to take it with me everywhere. I have to heal my own self every day. And sometimes I thought like it would have been so much easier if he would have just murdered me and dropped my body off the side of a fucking freeway. So many times, like I have thought, wow, that would have been so much easier than living through this and dealing with all of the nightmares. And I would see him out after that. And it was always like, he would just walk up to me and be like, "Oh, have you been?" Like it was always very strange. A year after all of this happened, we saw each other at Christmas time and he was like, "Baby," like it was just eerie. He's like, "You're so beautiful. You're just the most beautiful girl inside and out. How could I ever hurt you?" People are like, "Did he ever apologize?" Yes, he apologized profusely. And yet it was so tortured and so like, "I still care about you and I miss you and like I'm asking about you." And he had like tabs on me. That was part of the reason why I just like I had to leave Hollywood after a bit.
How old were you when you finally left?
I was almost 18. That night that I actually told him I'm not doing this, one thing that's really significant about that night, every member of that band came and hugged me that night, including the guitar player that like was very to himself. He even came up and hugged me and thanked me. And "We owe you everything. We owe you everything." I felt very strong and in my power that I was able to tell him what he had done to me. I had never been stronger. The few times I saw him after that and just would go right into his arms too. Like he'd open his arms and I'd just be like, and he'd hug me and be like, "Oh my God, I've heard you're doing well." And I would just hate myself afterwards. Oh my God, the idea that I could allow myself to just be that weakened really, really was awful for me. It's still one of those things that for years, I tried to get a hold of management and say, "Please, can we like have a meeting? Can we maybe talk? Like, I would like to talk to him as a grown woman. I would like to put this behind us in a way that I could heal maybe, and maybe he could even have some healing." This was years ago where I was like, I'm trying to be this loving, kind person and not take on all of this anger and hatred. And now, you know, I'm in a space where I realize it's okay for me to be angry. You know, I've had friends over the years that never really knew, and I just started talking more and more and more and more about it. And I've lost people that I considered my friends even because of this, because I feel the need to rectify the story. In 2 best-selling books say that rumor has it on Hollywood Boulevard that my mom slept with my rapist. No. You know, that's a huge part of this. I wish I could have taped her reaction to me being like, hey, Mom, in this book, it says that you did this. She was like, the amount of profanity that came out of this woman's mouth was unbelievable. I don't know. It's time now. I feel like I've been trying to just get my story out for so many years, and now things are coming together. And I myself am very hopeful that he pays for his crimes. And I have had to forgive myself for not going through at that age. And there's a lot of forgiveness for myself. I mean, I did my best to forgive every abuser that's ever hurt me recently, so it wasn't going to like eat my soul away. But I do believe that he should be held accountable for his actions. And I hope to be able to be at the forefront of that. I love this podcast. And it was one of the things that just has, you know, really given me hope about being able to share this story with others, and knowing that there is an outlet and more people can maybe share their stories, because there is healing in that.
Enough is a podcast centering on surviving abuse, harassment, and assault in the music scene. To help get the word out, please like and subscribe and share with your friends. If you have been on the receiving end of harm from someone, be it artist, venue owner, booking agent, audience member, or someone else, and would like to share your story on a future episode, please reach out to us at thisisenoughpodcast@gmail.com. All correspondences are kept confidential.